Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan, and we are excited to turn the page. Training camp over, preseason over, 53-man roster created, practice squad pretty much done, and now we turn the page and get ready for the Eagles, Adam. And it's not just like a whole week now. Friday,
So
next
weird.
Friday is the season opener in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And that just means we got a lot of stuff that we got to get done in the next, 6 to 7 days.
Yeah, by the way, if anyone's going, please tag us on Twitter. I'm very interested to see the pictures from there, fans. I'm I've got a couple dozen buddies who are Eagles season ticket holders, and no one's going. So I'm wondering who's going. If you don't work for the Eagles, are you going? Because the thing is, we don't know. It's a home game for the Eagles. We have no idea if it's going to be a home field advantage, if at all.
Well, absolutely. So it'll be interesting. Again, no home field advantage, a new offensive line, and I think we'll talk about this next week when we really get into it. But normally you want if you have a brand new center and a right guard, and you would love to have that first home game, so you're not worried about maybe
Yep.
using a silent count as much or nonverbal communication. But they may have to, I imagine it's going to be somewhere. Packers fans travel well. I imagine
Yeah.
it'll be a 50-50 type of split. We'll see, even if it's 60-40. But I expect a lot of Packers fans in the building. So when the Eagles have the ball, it's not going to be everybody just on their side. So that'll be a good early test for the O-line.
I'm not going to underestimate Eagle fans because when I remember when we have John DeFilippo on, one of the times we've had him on over the years, we talked about the 17 season, that Charger game when the Home Depot Center shook, when
Yep.
LeGarrette Blount went off, in that game, and John said it was something else to see in the opponent's home stadium. The Eagles fans took it over. That's
Well,
why
I'm
you
going to go
just
even
never
further
know.
back. I
What's that?
remember
Go
a
ahead.
game in '08 in
Okay.
Qualcomm. Was it called when they
Yeah.
played in San
San
Diego?
Diego. Yeah, the old Charger Stadium. Yeah, sure.
Had to be 70% Eagles fans. And the
Really?
Eagles lost
Wow.
that game. And I
Hmm.
kept thinking, if at any time the Eagles had won that game, by the way, I think Jason Avant had like 120 receiving yards that day. But if
Wow.
at any time the Eagles were ahead or really storming ahead, that whole place would have sounded like the Link West Coast version. But the Chargers actually did pretty well. But there were so
Hmm.
many Eagles fans down there in Qualcomm, one of our favorite old state cookie cutter stadiums.
I got to tell you though, the best Super Bowl event, like the best week, was in San Diego. In it's my first Super Bowl in '02. The game was terrible. It was the Tampa blew out the Raiders, but the week, for those of you who listen to us in San Diego, it was all the parties were in downtown San Diego near the gas lamp, and the Petco Park was just it wasn't quite done yet. It might have opened maybe the next year, but it's how long ago this was. It just to have a Super Bowl that kind of weather is just special, man. It's no doubt.
No doubt about it. San Diego, great town.
Yeah.
All right, so Eagles. All right, let's for this episode, this podcast, we're going to funnel this toward the 53-man roster, the practice squad, a little bit of intel on the schedule we'll talk about, next week, but really just mostly intel right now on how the 53-man roster came together and the practice squad, some of the philosophies that went into both of those. So good stuff there. Let's start off with the one very interesting fact, Adam. This might be the first time for the Eagles in a while.
Okay.
Before we get into who got waived, but the fact that no player the Eagles waived got claimed, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and they also did not have any claims. They didn't get any
And they didn't
players.
claim anybody, right?
Right. It's kind of odd. Generally, there's 20 to 30 players who get claimed. I think there were 26 this time.
Mhm.
On Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, practice squads were able to be filled out at 1. It's just so funny. Like, literally, teams are announcing their full squad. Not all of them. Some teams only have partial, but a couple teams announced like the full 17, 16 players plus the one international player. Like, they announced them at like 1:30 Eastern. It's kind of comical. It's like, okay, whoa, you guys really worked on it very, very quickly. It's just kind of wink, wink, nod, nod. Hey, if your guy clears, we want him back, kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so a couple of big picture themes. We will get into all the players the Eagles waived in a second, but and anybody who listened to our any of our Patreon members who heard our instant intel on it and even listened to the podcast last week, we were hinting toward this possibly happening. But the Eagles did not, for all the hubbub I made in maybe like March or April when the Eagles signed Matt Hennessy and they started to say, all right, well, they got a new center. They want to make sure they have someone who's actually snapped the ball to be a backup. The Eagles did not keep on their initial 53, a backup center with snapping experience. Nick Gates waived, Brett Toth waived, and 6th-round pick Dylan McMahon.
Terminated. Just to correct you on
Yeah,
that. It
I'm
was
sorry,
definitely
I am
terminated.
bad with the terminology. Nick Gates got released, cut, terminated. He's a vested vet, right?
It's right there. Read it's all in the script.
Well, I don't always look at the screen. I'm looking
All
at
right,
you.
all right.
But yeah. So we'll go with that. But the point is they didn't keep a backup center, but they are going to use the practice squad additions there to their advantage.
Yeah, we did. In fact, we alluded to that when we talked about on the last this previous show about guys who probably won't make it. Nick Gates. We thought that Gates would be the guy who would sign to their practice squad and be called off of it prior to the Green Bay game. Now, so that game is on Friday. So I guess so. Yeah, you have to do it the night before. So Thursday, he figures to be called up. They called up one of the three elevations, and there's your backup center guard. Now, what we reported at the time of their signing when they brought Gates in back in August, that he's really a better guard than center. He prefers center, by the way, we're told, but he's better at guard. But again, he can play both, and he'll be the backup center for the time being. So yeah, it is weird, man. It's kind of we knew Dylan McMahon. You and I in our 53, we did not have him on there. We thought very strongly there was no way he was ready to play, and he's not. He made it to the practice squad. We'll talk about the practice squad list later, but they went with a veteran and a guy who's been there and done that.
Yeah. And, I think we've seen this more as they manipulate the practice squad to make it, as you always like to say, it's a full 69 player roster, right? You'll see more veterans: John Ross, Paris Campbell, Matt Hennessy, Nick Gates, Brett Toth, Max Sharping, Oren Brooks, Julian Okwara, and Parry Nickerson. These guys are veterans who were terminated,
Yeah.
right, and released because the Eagles kept players on their team that are younger. They kept Ben Van Sumeren as an extra linebacker. They kept Eli Ricks as an extra corner. They kept Thomas Booker, who had an impressive camp at defensive tackle, right? So you started to see, even though they did waive their center that we mentioned, Dylan McMahon. For the most part, they tried to hold on to as many young players as they could that will help their team. A lot of rookies, the Johnny Wilsons, obviously the Will Shipleys was going to make it as well.
Yeah, and I honestly, there was some years, it's like when Donnell Pumphrey, the Eagles kept him in 2017. He clearly had no business being on the team. It was kind of known early on that, okay, he's not the player that they drafted out of San Diego State. He led San Diego State in the history of their school. He outproduced Marshall Faulk, so obviously that's interesting. But he's super small, and he wound up never playing in an NFL game. But I think one of the things Eagles try to do, even if they think it might not work out, is just give the guy a chance the next year. It didn't work, but they knew that early on. Whereas with these rookies, okay, McMahon was small. We knew this. He wasn't going to make it. He was a 6th-round pick. Now he's on the practice squad. Let's see if he can beef up his body a little bit, working on his technique, so forth, so on and so forth. But Johnny Wilson looked like he's a player. At least as a backup, he could contribute. No question. He deserved to be on the roster. Okay, he definitely earned that. Mm-hmm. Trevor Keegan has some promise. As Andrew talked about the last show, maybe they're gonna cross train at center and right guard. Right now he's only left guard, but maybe long term he becomes the interior backup guy. Shipley clearly deserved it. He had a very good training camp. Hunt obviously is going to be on the team. He's a 3rd rounder, but he showed some promise. You look at and by the way, you mentioned this is the big one for me is Ben Van Sumeren. You and I talked to so many people around the league last season who just raved about that Giants tape. It's kind of funny when other teams just, I know they have to do advance on their opponent, but they're like, wow, this 57, holy smokes, this kid could play a little bit. And Greg said that on our pregame show last year, how great the tape was. Greg wasn't even, he didn't, if I recall correctly, A, he had not seen him play, and B, I don't think he knew how to pronounce his last name. It's kind of funny. And like, it was kind of cool,
Yeah.
And Trotter's been good. Trotter Jr.'s ahead of schedule. He had a good camp. Tristan McCollum, good for the Eagles. So I don't think it was a scholarship situation where, okay, this guy's on our roster, and we drafted him. Even though he didn't show any promise, let's put him on there. And you mentioned Thomas Booker. I think this year, for the most part, other than maybe Eli Ricks, that's debatable. I think these guys deserved it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I thought McCollum played himself on to the roster, and he had some competition because Andre Sam played well too and caught some attention, and he's back on the practice squad. We'll get to him. And that whole safety picture right now,
Mm.
and cornerback picture. I'm gonna borrow a term that we used on for our Patreon members that you used in the video there that we did for them. Definitely some guys who should be renting and not buying, because between now and the season opener, there might be some changes based on what's available. I don't know how many changes, but that would be the position, safety and corner, where you might wonder if not by week 1, by week 2, week 3, we'll talk about James Bradbury in a few minutes. If there might be, somebody moving on. Let's go through the players that were waived on offense real quick.
Yeah, we'll give you intel the more we know on this as we go ahead.
Right. So running backs, Ty Davis Price, Kendall Milton, Lou Nichols, as the Eagles kept 3 running backs. Wide receiver, Jacob Harris, man, he suffered. I feel bad for that. I don't know if he was going to make it. I doubt he was. Yeah. Although with wide receiver and with Anaya Smith starting the year on injured reserve and having to be out at least 4 games, I just don't know what would have happened with Jacob Harris. But Andrew DeCecco reported that he had a concussion and fractured bones in his face. That really sucks.
Wow. Yeah, that was crazy. Like that was, I mean, I saw him walk off and it looked like he was dinged. Was it on coverage? Wasn't on special teams, I think?
Yeah, I think it was after a special teams play, right? Or no, was that a match? Yeah.
I think because I saw him walking off and he had his head down. I'm like, oh, it looks like he got hurt. And then we know he was wave injured, by the way. So the way that works is they reach an injury settlement with him if they want to, or he just stays on IR. Joe Ngata, by the way, was also wave injured. Austin Watkins was the one where I know a lot of fans wanted him to make it. We thought he would have a chance. In fact, we know he had a chance. That's why they gave him a good practice squad guarantee. But it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen for him. Griffin Hebert was cut. Folsch, how do you say Folsch?
Kevin Folsch.
Yeah. Armani Rogers was cut, as we fully expected. EJ Jenkins. Yeah, I didn't have him. Did you and I?
I did. I had him. It's funny because I cut both centers, the Gates and Toth, thinking that Jenkins would make it. Now they wound up moving on from both of those centers, but they did not keep EJ Jenkins. But I think we can say when we get into the practice squad, we'll talk about it more with 100% clarity and certainty that even though the Eagles only have 2 tight ends on their 53-man roster right now, they are not going into the season opener without having a 3rd tight end active and not called up from the practice squad.
You mean they don't want Darian Kennard to be their extra tackle, their extra tight end?
That's correct. Actually, it might be Ben Van Sumeren, right? Because he's played tight end on the last practice snap in the last day of training camp.
What was he? I'm sorry. What did he do?
Andrew DeCecco wrote about this. It's still up on the website. The last day of training camp, Nick Sirianni got a little creative with the one-on-ones, and he had Ben Van Sumeren line up against somebody for a rep, but Ben Van Sumeren was an offensive player who was acting like a tight end, and he put a great move on an out route, and Kenny Pickett overthrew him.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. I forget who it was that was defending him, but apparently the defense went crazy. The offense, they said Ben Sumeren, wow, nice job. So
because what happens sometimes, like if you go, you've seen this before, like at the end of practice, like they might have they might ask an lineman to catch 4 or 5 punts. If he catches them all, they don't have to practice they don't have to stay after an hour. Or tomorrow morning they could report late to their meetings instead of 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. They can report at 10 a.m. So you never know what kind of. I've seen this in a lot of camps. It's actually because the players get into it because if they could get a couple extra hours of sleep, it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But you're just finishing this off. So Marnie.
By the way, it was Andre Sam that Ben Van Sumeren, a real safety that Ben Van Sumeren put a move on and got open against.
Ben can run, man.
He's an athlete.
Straight line speed, right? So you mentioned the tight ends. Dylan McMahon was cut as we expected. You know what's interesting? The Eagles list McMahon as a guard center.
Oh my!
I'll ask Andrew. I don't remember him lining up a guard. Maybe he did in camp, but I didn't see it.
I mean, he's too small to play. He's barely big enough to play center, but he's too small to play guard.
I mean, if he weighs if he weighs 300, he must be holding an anvil. I just don't see it. He's so small,
Yeah, he's small.
But anyway, Jason Poe, we know he wasn't going to make it. We know this when they signed him, but you know what? Give the kid credit. He came back and competed. Anim Dankwa, who did not have a great training camp. They
Yeah.
were hoping to kind of get him a little bit more involved. He was not ready. And Vakalahi, the international player, of course, was waived defensively. Mustafa, we know PJ Hall wasn't going to make it. He didn't do anything in training camp.
Yeah.
Huge practice squad guarantee. We'll explain that. Brandon Smith didn't make it as we expected. To be honest with you, Terrell Lewis not making it. Teron Jackson, who was a draftee in 2021. Caden Stearns was waived with a non-football injury. He was not waived injured, though. It's interesting.
Right.
That way, he does not go to IR.
Right.
Andre Sam, Zach McPherson, Josh Jobe, Sean Stevens. You mentioned the terminated, the veteran. These are vested veterans. Let me explain. Contracts terminated. Guys who have 4 years or more of accrued experience. John Ross, Paris Campbell, Matt Hennessy, Nick Gates, Brett Toth, Sharping, Burks, Aquara, who went to the Cardinals, by the way, signed with their practice squad, and Parry Nickerson. IR at Albert O and Nia Smith with the designations to return. C.D. Brown, of course, because he never wound up practicing. There was just no way that they were going to not put him on PUP.
Right.
He has to miss a minimum of 4 games, not weeks. It's actual games is the language. It's games, not weeks.
Correct. So four games for Sidney Brown, and then you get a window of, I want to say, 2 weeks before you have to make a decision on whether to put him on the roster or then he goes on IR. Is that
Well, no,
correct?
you
No?
it could take as long as you need to. No, what happens is once you designate him for return, then you'll have 21 days to make a decision.
That's what I
Whether he,
said. When the 4 weeks are over, if they've designated him
well,
for return, then he has
no, no,
two
no.
weeks.
But if he's not, no, no. But
Okay.
I see what you mean. But no, what I'm saying is he doesn't have
Oh, I know
he,
they can just not play him at
8
all. I
games.
get that. Yeah,
Right,
I'm
that's
just
what I
saying
mean.
when they make that decision to
Okay.
take him off
Oh,
and
to
put him in the
designate him.
window,
Yes, yes,
it's 3 weeks.
yes.
It's a 21-day window, right? It's a 3 week
Yes.
window.
Now, but what I'm saying is, and you and I are
Mhm.
saying the same thing.
Mhm.
If they designate him to return after the 4 games as you're talking about, yes, they have 21 days. Or in this case, um, they could wait 8 games. It's
Sure.
just whenever they feel he's ready. And that one is interesting because everything we've heard is it's healed well. He's doing really well, but they wanted to because it's a major injury. He didn't have any other residual effects, as we understand it. They just feel like he's not ready to come back yet. So okay, that's fine. Look, he's got a long career, and you know what the shame of it is? 2 or 3 weeks before to his ACL, he had really, we heard, made a big jump,
Mhm.
and he gets hurt. Was it was it the Tampa Bay game? Forget.
It depends on
It
your
was late.
definition of big jump. I mean, he was starting to
It was
play
better.
better, but then even when he did, then he had to get remember if he got wedged into this slot role, this nickel role, which is he is not suited for one-on-one coverage in the slot. That is not his thing.
Well,
He got
you're right.
matched up.
Yes, that was stupid. But
Yeah.
when they
Well, I
did
mean, they
that,
had no. I think they had so many
they ran out
injuries
of
with
it.
Justin Evans and somebody else that they had no choice.
They ran out of players. Yes, but what I'm saying is he was so not ready for that. But
Right.
as a pure safety, what they
Hmm.
asked him to do, he went from struggling, and obviously he had the coordinator change. They tried to keep quiet and the craziness of the lack of discipline.
Uh-huh.
But I'm just saying, overall, on what they asked him to do, he really made a big jump in terms
Yep.
of playing pure safety. But
Hmm.
the nickel stuff, it's just how much. I get it. The coaches were searching because so much went wrong.
Yeah,
But
if you remember, like it wasn't just they had a couple of injuries. Maddox was hurt, Justin Evans was hurt,
yeah,
Bradley Roby. They had about four nickels that were hurt, and so they had nobody left to put there. I mean, they were trying Ricks there, and then of course they tried him in that role, and it really didn't work. Hopefully, when he comes back, like you just said, with the depth they have now at corner, they'll be able to play him as a natural safety, whether it's box or post, and really capitalize on his strengths.
yeah, and I'm interested to see how Vic Fangio sees him because we don't know. He hasn't practiced. That's the thing. He hasn't practiced since he got hurt last season. And all he's done, when I would go to practice, is you see him take the mental reps,
Right.
and we've seen him running on the side or whatever you want to call it, but we'll see. But it does leave him in an interesting situation with Bradbury still on the roster for now, and McCollum, and good for the Eagles to reward him. That's what I was saying earlier, man. I'm glad that the guys who have been good stories and performed in whether it's training camp and preseason or both that they're on the team.
There you go. So the big takeaways from the terminations and the waves are that the Eagles did not keep backup interior or center, backup center on the 53. They went light offensively compared to defensively. I believe it was 28 on defense, 22 on offense. They went a little lighter at wide receiver because they only kept 5, and one of them, Johnny Wilson, has been dealing with a concussion. Hopefully, he'll be able to
Yeah.
practice this week. And so they did that to stay heavier on the defensive side. And a couple of guys they will bring back. We'll get into the practice squad in a second. Now, I know Teron Jackson, I believe, signed with the Panthers practice squad. So he moves on with them. I'm trying to think if anybody else of these waves already got picked up by
Well,
another team.
Donqua, I know that leading up to the draft, Washington, the Eagles and the Commandos were in it for him. And I got their practice squad list, and they had not signed him as of Wednesday evening.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still out there. We mentioned Aquara to the Cardinals. They actually announced that. So
Yep.
that's that's pretty much it. No real surprises there.
Was
And
Toth probably the one? I mean, you and I felt like McMahon just wasn't ready to be a backup center no matter
yeah,
what. Gates, we felt you could get, you could terminate and then sign him back to your practice squad. Toth was the guy who played all 3 positions, and you and I would say this over and over and over again. He's playing 3 positions, but is he playing any of them well? What
yeah,
jumps out about Brett Toth, and it just felt like a stout and special. So
exactly.
we can tell you he was surprised to not be on the 53 when all was said and done. And it'll be interesting to see what at the time of us recording this. I don't think he has found a home, and he's not yet on the Eagles practice squad.
Now the Eagles do, and we'll get to their practice squad and break that down and give you some background, some interesting stuff there. But Toth, see, I missed on 3 guys. Obviously Bradbury, no one was going to get that right. Ricks, nobody had that. No one got Ricks on the Eagles 53, and I cut McMahon, but I had Toth on it based on what you just said. It was just he's been here so many years.
Mm-hmm.
He was the backup center for most of training camp. So what we learned was just because a guy's the first backup at a position, if he doesn't look good enough, they'll just Jimmy rig it like we suggested on the previous show. Gates, if he doesn't make it, which he didn't, figures to be that guy, and he is. He's going to be that guy they're going to call up.
Right. There you go. All right. So that is the waves and the terminations, and let's get into the practice squad in a second. Big week coming up. Also, big weekend, I should say. College football. I think people are probably tired of hearing me talk about it, but I'm getting very excited for the Penn State West Virginia game on Saturday. Hoping those Nittany Lions have a good season this year. And listen, people love to go to college football games, Temple, Rutgers, anywhere locally or nationally, and you can get great tickets to college football along with other sports and concerts and theater shows by using the Game Time app. And they've got this awesome feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite team play live even easier. It filters out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Some people know where they want to sit. Some people are looking for the best value in a certain row. They don't want to sit in the nosebleeds. They're willing to spend some money depending on if they can get a good value in, a different area of a venue. So that's what the super deal is. And they've got the amazing deal. They just have a filter full of great deals that they know that you're going to like based on where the seat is. And that's what my favorite part of the app, along with seeing the view from the seat before you buy. And then, of course, showing you the price up front. There's no hidden fees at checkout. We always talk about Game Time's perks, like the lowest price guarantee. You'll get accredited 110% of the difference if you find a lower price. They've got the event cancellation protection and the job loss protection. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. And remember, that's not just sports, it's concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it is. All right. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or football tickets, Eagles tickets, whatever you want with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code BIRDS, BIRDS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Adam, the practice squad, the one thing that sort of jumps out at me that before we get into all the names, I just want to pick your brain on this.
Sure.
The Eagles kept 3 quarterbacks, right?
I know.
Sometimes when you keep a fourth on your practice squad, it's a young developmental guy,
There
or
you
it's
go.
a veteran who can run around and simulate a very mobile quarterback. There's almost no reps in an NFL practice for the third quarterback, let
I
alone
know.
the fourth one, because the starter gets like 80% of them, the backup gets 20%, and the third stringer, that guy runs the scout team. So Will Greer being a very quick, when you talk about renting, not buying, I wonder how long he's going to be on the Eagles practice squad for, and why
Just
in the first
I
place.
well, he's there because of Kellen Moore and
Yeah.
the quarterbacks coach, because they know him. They've been with him. Let's see, third place, Dallas, the Chargers last year, and the Eagles. But that line that you use, I'd be renting, not buying. So I used that for Chip Kelly. So I was doing a show with my friend Joe DeCamera at the Fanatic back in 2015, and I kind of stayed out of speculating he was going to be fired. But it was to the point where I know this is he was DMW, dead man walking, in terms of being the head coach. I'm like, Joe said, "What do you think? Do you think he'll make it? Do you think he'll be back next year?" I said, "If I were Chip, I would be renting, not buying." I just was joking. I didn't think this would cause any problem, but I got yelled at by someone. Yeah, I was
A
like,
good term, man. I think, hey, listen, that's what the NFL is all about.
yeah,
You're on one roster, for like 80% of the league, right? You're on
yeah,
one
exactly.
roster one day, another roster another
By the
day.
way, I think
That's how it works.
we're on that. Will Greer obviously has been through that with the Panthers, who was drafted by in a third round. Boy, that was a miss.
Yeah.
Dallas, Cincinnati, New England, Chargers, and Eagles. Now he's there because he's a teacher's pet. He knows the scheme and he could help them. But see, what coaches have told me over the years, they also want, and it's on your point, they want someone to run the look team, which is to simulate, okay, we want you to be Russell Wilson today, or today we want you to be Jordan Love. That's who they're playing. I mean, I know Greer could move a little bit. I don't know who would. It certainly won't be McKee.
No,
Pickett could do it.
I know.
Pickett's the
I mean,
backup.
you would
I don't
think
know.
on most days of practice, McKee should be the guy running your look team, unless you're splitting your backup reps between McKee and Pickett. But that's so few. I don't know if people realize how few reps the backup quarterback
Zero. They
gets.
don't.
Yeah.
They
Well,
really.
sometimes there's a session at the end where they'll try to get the backup some reps, but yeah, it's really geared toward the starter.
It's that in that developmental period that Sirianni talks about, which is a great idea, by the way. One of the things that I know agents really love is most teams don't do this, where they have the developmental period after practice, and that maybe that's how Tanner McKee maybe is being able to improve. But I'm going to ask DiFilippo next time I talk to him, John. I'm going to ask John, what for the look team, like what kind of okay, is it just okay? He could simulate like what are you looking for in that third string quarterback or that practice squad quarterback? Is there any characteristics,
Right.
athleticism, arm strength? Is there anything you're looking for? Something we really haven't talked about. I'm very curious.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think Will Greer in particular, and especially with this changeover in offense, maybe he's still helping guys like Jalen
Oh,
and Kenny
100%.
Pickett and Tanner
Oh yeah,
really
that's why he's
understand
here.
the ins and outs of it. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean
no doubt about it.
he's a coach. He's like a coaching assistant. He might be a coach someday. Who knows? But yeah, that would so it's Greer. Let's get to this
Mhm.
practice squad. So the Eagles signed 13 players plus the one international player. So they have 3 openings left as we speak here. Very early Thursday morning, if you're listening to us on Thursday morning, when the show debuts, for non-Patreon people. Will Greer, as you mentioned, Ty Davis Price, who did, other than the drop passes in training camp, and the Eagles are a super huge inside zone team. At least they have been before. As Jack Driscoll talked about with the Dolphins when he was doing the interview, I actually got the Dolphins transcript. He talked about the differences between the Eagles run scheme and the Dolphins. I thought it was pretty interesting what he
Mhm.
talked about gap scheme and inside zone. But so Davis Price was the only running back so far to sign there. Uh, Paris Campbell, receivers. Paris Campbell is another veteran. That's 2 so far. Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, who was signed by the Commanders as an undrafted free agent, then cut. And Greg Cosell likes. Doesn't run all that
So
well,
yeah,
but
Andrew reported that the Eagles they tried to make a strong push to sign him after the draft. Obviously, he
ah,
went with
okay,
Washington, so he's a
nice.
guy that they were
They liked
interested
him.
in.
Yeah.
And, the Eagles were sniffing around. We learned some wide receivers for their practice squad who were not necessarily with the team in camp. In fact, one guy was from Cleveland, Mike Woods. We were told Mike Woods is a guy that the Eagles sniffed around, had some potential interest in. He wound up re-signing to the Browns practice squad because he's been there for a while. This just goes to show that, like, you knew Paris Campbell was a good shot to come back, but the Eagles always like to have some young developmental guys
Yep.
on the practice squad. So obviously that'll be Marcus. How do you pronounce it? It's Marcus Roseme Jackson.
Yep.
Jackson. Jackson.
Jack Saint. Yeah, I don't know
Okay.
if I don't know if I don't know how he, although I took French in high school and college, I don't know how he why when I went to Penn Charter, for those of you in Philly, we were required to take a foreign language. So I did Latin early, and then when I got to Cheltenham High, I took French. I love French, man. I wish I would have stayed with it. It's a good language. The other signees, we kind of alluded to this the last show. Jack Stoll, the word we got was that he had actually, despite him turning down the Eagles and signing, the Eagles actually offered him in free agency. The two teams that offered were the Giants and Eagles. He signed with the Giants, but he had a good relationship with his teammates and the tight ends coaches. We understand, and remember he was a roommate of Cam Jurgens at Nebraska, so he's back. And as we noted last show, they badly needed a backup wide tight end, like really bad. You need someone who can block. Particularly if Goddard can't play. You remember 2 years ago when Calcaterra and Stoll filled in, they did a nice job. Stoll's the inside guy, is the Y inside tight end, and then Calcaterra is the move tight end. That actually worked pretty well. And by golly, here we are again 2 years later.
I would have to think that he will be. It's close because EJ Jenkins was with them all camp, but I would
Correct.
still. This will be an interesting decision. I would probably handicap it 60-40 in favor of Stoll, that he'll be the third tight end called up from you get 3 elevations from the practice squad. So they're going to elevate a tight end to be a third tight end. I would think it'll be Jack Stoll, but if it was EJ, it wouldn't totally shock me, but I would think Jack Stoll.
Well said. I thought you set that up well because Stoll doesn't know the scheme. I mean, he doesn't. I mean, he's got to get the terminology. From what we understand, he's a pretty smart guy, but he's got to really get up to speed in less than a week.
Yeah.
They practice.
In fact, the way you put it, the more I think about it, maybe it won't be. Maybe he might need a little time. I don't know.
Yeah, he might. But long term, he figures to be the backup Y and addresses the third tight end. But Jenkins, I'll tell you what, EJ Jenkins really improved as a blocker. I don't know that he's there yet. Plus, they cut him, so they felt that he wasn't there yet. I mean, if they thought he was, they probably would have kept him on the roster because there's a saying in personnel: you're willing to lose anyone you cut. If you cut the guy, if you terminate his contract as a veteran, or you cut a non-vested player who's got to go through waivers, you just, hey, I'm willing to lose the guy. And they were, and he was not claimed, and he's back. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how ready he is. We'll know next week. You mentioned Nick Gates, who's another veteran. Dylan McMahon, who's back, cleared waivers. Vakalahi is their international player, so that spot is taken. Defensively, Gabe Hall, who's got a major practice squad guarantee. We'll get his contract later. I don't have it in front of me. Burks is back. That's a good move.
Yeah.
Not that they need another inside backer. In fact, wow, what are your thoughts on that? They have 7 on their 69-man roster. I'm sorry, 70-man roster because you're including the international guy. But could you explain to me why they needed 2 more? Burks is the veteran, Brandon Smith, who's not vested. That's 7. Do you really need 7?
No. I want to look more into Brandon Smith. I wonder if Vic, after seeing him, thinks that maybe there's the potential to turn him into an edge guy because he's very athletic and he can blitz well. I don't know anything about that. I just, to your point, I'm trying to figure out why you're keeping 7 inside linebackers when you only really play, 1 or 2 on a down basis. He's 6'3", 240, so that would be a little small for an edge. I mean, generally you want those guys 6'5", 250, but we were talking about a backup edge here.
Long,
so
but
he's got some length to him. So we'll see.
Didn't you tell us weeks ago about him at Penn State? What was his role? Didn't you tell us some stuff about
He was
Brandon?
an inside linebacker.
Yeah.
He would, I mean, they remember their coordinator he just left to become the head coach at Duke was Manny Diaz. And Manny Diaz comes from if you're on my defense, I'll blitz you from whatever position you're playing school. So everybody blitz, but I felt watching the team that Smith was a better player going forward
Okay.
than backward. So we'll see. We'll see what
Well,
the role is there for him.
on that point, Jamin Davis became more of an edge rusher, believe it or not, with the new staff with Dan Quinn.
Makes a lot of sense.
And they're both long. Brandon Smith is high hipped. He's kind of awkward the way he runs because he's just really long and he's thin.
Yeah.
But he's got straight line speed. I did see that. On your point, I did see him blitz in practice and training camp.
Yeah.
So I wonder, we'll have to see what happens. And then to fill it out, Caden Stearns and Andre Sam are your safeties on the practice squad. Now, this is good for Stearns because now there's no rush. If it takes him 2 months to get the knee right, coming back from the patella tendon injury, which is worse than an ACL, and Andre Sam, who had a good camp, he opened some eyes, and he's a developmental safety. So we'll see. This is an interesting group. The guys that I think have a contribute to be added from the practice squad to the 53 would be Paris Campbell, Stahl, Jenkins, obviously, Gates, obviously, Burks.
Now
Yeah.
you mean for the season opener or just at
No, no,
some?
no. I'm saying in the
Okay.
course of the season. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
now Ty Davis Price, if somebody gets hurt, they don't need to have 4 running backs unless someone gets hurt. But so to sum this up, Campbell for sure, because we got to see what happens with Johnny Wilson and his concussion. Jack Stoll, they had or Jenkins or both. Not you. Well, you wouldn't draw 4, but I'm just saying for the course of the season, clearly one, if not both, will eventually be brought up. It just depends on which guy. Gates for sure. They need a backup center. Plus he could play guard. Gabe Hall, I don't see it. He just didn't show it in training camp, but he's got a huge practice squad guarantee, so he's back. Burks, again, it's simple. You don't need 6. You don't need 6 ILBs. You only play 2. It just depends if anyone gets hurt, but he does have experience. Stearns, I don't know that he'll be up here this year because again, it for now we'll talk about Bradbury in a bit. As of now, he's still in the 53, and Sam again. When you really look at their situation now, as of right now, right, Thursday morning, Gardner Johnson, Blankenship, Maddox are your top 3. You have 5 safeties. Bradbury, who never, despite what whether Fangio or the DB's coach said, they said, well, Bradbury would take some reps at corner. He never did in camp. So they've got 5 safeties on the roster. McCollum's the 5th. Now, when I say he's the 5th, Bradbury does not play specials. McCollum does. So, and Bradbury very realistically will be, if he's still with the team, will be inactive week 1. So I don't see a scenario unless somebody gets hurt where you're going to be calling up Caden Stearns, excuse me,
Right.
at any point in the near future.
No, he's got to be 100% healthy first, and then you'll see. I
Yep.
think that Bradbury and Ricks are probably extraordinarily good candidates to not be active week 1. The big issue I think the Eagles are going to have is you're only allowed to elevate 2 players per game, right? From the practice squad. We've already said center and tight end are no-brainers. You need that backup center. You need that tight end, number 3 tight end. That means that they would go in, if they don't activate Paris Campbell, they go in with just 5 receivers, but your 4 and 5 are Wilson and Britton Covey. I feel like, man, if AJ Brown or Devontae Smith and stubbed their toe and couldn't finish the game, and you got to move Jahan Dotson outside and play Covey or Wilson, that to me, I'd love to have the luxury of having Paris Campbell on that roster.
Oh, because he's strong. Yeah, he's got good.
And he can play the position, he can play.
Sure.
I mean, he's functional.
Well, he can function, we think, to a certain degree. We just haven't seen him play good football in a long time.
Right.
But you're right. He's got good size. He's a veteran. They might need him. That's an interesting call-up for game day. Now, there is another strategy, but it would require cutting a player, whereas on elevations, you don't have to cut anyone to make room. They just they revert to the practice squad the day after the game. So you could still sign him off the practice squad, and then if the guy's if it's a vested veteran, of course, in this case, but see, Stoll's not vested, so he'd have to go through. If you sign him off the practice squad, he has to go through waiver. Same with Jenkins. So that strategy probably wouldn't work.
Yeah.
You probably don't. Well, these guys weren't claimed off waivers. You could take the risk, but I'm just bringing this up because that's a strategy which you can use at some point. But I like more in your point. This is more of a practice squad elevation.
Yeah.
For this game. And we'll talk about the matchup next week against Green Bay. And let's not forget, folks, Green Bay no longer is running a 34 front. They're not having 2 stand-up pass rushers. So the strategy, and we know that this OC, Kellen Moore, wants to run a heavy 11 personnel. Well, but we got to see what his strategy is in week one. Let's see that we still haven't seen it yet because you don't show anything in the preseason. I'll be interested to see how much 12 they play in week one.
Same here. Let's go through a few more items before we get out of here on next week's schedule. First, we want to pause to hear a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
I suppose one roster finagling that could happen that would open up a spot to either get Paris Campbell or a center or a tight end on would be if there was some move involving James Bradberry. I mean, I think we have to be on that kind of James Bradberry watch.
Oh yeah,
for until it happens, because it's going to look very weird when you have an inactive player making $13 million a year, but you can't do anything about it now. He's not part of their process.
I mean, and again, what scenario would you have for him to be active week one if everybody's healthy, right?
I wouldn't, because somebody, Mike Gill asked me that. He's like, do you at least activate him as a backup safety and play him if you get, I said, or play him. Do you play him because you have to pay him? And I said, no, this is about winning games now. This isn't preseason. This isn't the camp. You don't just experiment. You need to win games. James Bradberry has not played enough at safety for you to just put him out there just to play him because of his salary and say he'll make plays. No, he'll give up plays because he's not a safety. I'm not trying to diss James Bradberry. I'm just talking about the reality is when you have your best defenses out there at safety, you're going to have Gardner Johnson, Blankenship, maybe Avonte Maddox. If you need a third safety, you want to play big nickel. You need McCollum for special teams. You're not playing Bradberry on special teams to go get him hurt. So he's not going to play. You need to win games. You need your best personnel, and he's certainly not going to play outside corner.
Yeah, and well, next week, speaking of that, we'll try to learn more a little bit in terms of Cooper DeJean. Where do they line him up? Is he going to be just nickel? We know he said very plainly that they haven't lined up at safety yet, but we know long term a lot of teams see him as a safety. Eagles don't. We'll make that clear. At least they don't at this point. So if they don't draft Bradberry, which seems to be obvious, barring something again, unless the other safeties are hurt, McCollum's your fourth. As you mentioned, he's a special teamer. No one dresses as absurd as it was last year. The Eagles kept 7 D tackles. They would wind up trading one of them, not too much longer, not too much later, as you know, to Atlanta. But you don't dress 5 safeties. You just don't. There's no scenario where you would play 5 safeties. Now, the Eagles could do in terms of just using 4 safeties. We did see some big nickel in training camp, which is 3 safety alignment. And that justifies you having 4 safeties up, but 5 safeties, folks, that just doesn't happen.
No, does not happen. All right. I forgot to mention, Adam, I wanted to thank a whole lot of our new Patreon subscribers who have either become new subscribers or upgraded their subscription. And there have been, over the last, 5 days, countless. I'll try to get as many thank yous as I can out there, but Andrew, Jay, Matthew, Devin, Bradley, Lamont, Ken, Philly Sports Rap, Marvin, so Chuck, Sion, and probably countless others. Alan, that have just come aboard. Brandon, I'm just going through the list here. Jerry, want to thank them all so much. I imagine that they've been really happy with the extra live streams we're doing. We just had a great conversation with Todd Hermans, who talked to us about Mekhi Becton and what he's seen in Becton transitioning from tackle to guard and how Todd went through that experience many times in his career. He had some really interesting things to say. And of course, tonight is going to be our first Ask an Eagle show for our tier 2 and tier 3. No, I'm sorry, tier 3 Patreon member. That's the highest tier because this is tier 2 and tier 3. I'm sorry. Yeah. Ask an Eagle is our Zoom conversation, right, with a former Eagles coach, player, or front office member. And we're really excited that Mike Quick is going to come on, Quick 6, and he's going to answer questions for our Patreon members. They're going to be in the Zoom chat with us. They're going to ask the questions. You and I are going to moderate, and Mike has agreed to answer him the best he can. He's been at training camp. He's obviously the color commentator, so it's just I'm really looking forward to it because I think our Patreon members are going to love it.
And he's an avid listener, as he's told us of
He did
Inside
say
the Bird.
that.
We appreciate Mike. Oh, my favorite 82. No offense to LJ Smith or Anaya Smith.
LJ Smith, blast from the past right there.
I know, because you're growing up here. I could go through, like, I used to be able to do the Flyers numbers, starting with Ed Van Amp number 2 and going to, like, Wayne Stevenson for you older people of number 35. So I could go through if I just sat. I can't do it now. I know maybe 5 numbers of the Eagles because there's all this craziness of you could wear any number you want. But I used to be able to go through, like, starting with, the punter, like, for you older people with who are older than 50, like me. Might remember, and I hate to bring this up because of what happened, but I have to bring it up. Mike Mosher, who missed that damn extra point, was it? He missed like the 79. Folks who remember better memories than I, Mike. I know DeCamera, if he's listening, would know this, but he might have been like number 6. But it was a kicker who missed like an extra point or something for an important game. But I could, and I'm sure you do it, whatever teams you like growing up. I used to be able to go through like the whole roster, without looking, by name, because I always learn numbers first, then names. That's how I'd kind of connect it. And I could go through like the certain numbers who wore them over the last like 30 years. But now I don't know. Slay is number 2, right? Is that right? Slay's 2. Is
2 or 3. I'm terrible with jersey. Even
I
as
can't
a
do it
kid,
anymore.
I just never really paid attention to them.
Well, no, but what hurt is once they let the players pick whatever number, because you always could go by position. Okay, linemen had to be anywhere from the 50s through the 70s, right? Well, now they could, they could more. They've opened up some of the numbers for linemen, but receivers they could wear 1, they could wear 19, they could wear 34, whatever the hell it is,
Right.
So it's harder, man. It's harder.
All right. Moving on. Just this week's schedule is going to be a little bit wonky than normal because the Eagles, not only are they playing on a Friday night, but they have a rare 10-hour flight to get to.
Long?
Yeah, it's 10 hours.
Oh,
yeah. Brazil seems closer than that. Like, yeah, South America just a little bit. No, it's deep out there in Brazil, so it's a 10-hour flight. So basically, I'm trying, we said, obviously, if the game's on Friday, Thursday is going to be an off day, and Wednesday is probably the travel day, right? So that makes, I would think Sunday, Monday, Tuesday are like kind of the big 3 practice days you would imagine for the Eagles.
well,
They'll come back before that, obviously, but go ahead. I mean, they are back already.
So the way it works is, I look at the language that I got from the league earlier this week. So the injury reports will come out Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It's kind of weird because they force teams to put an injury report out 3 days prior to their game. So even on the walkthrough day on Thursday, they have to list who didn't work, which is kind of cool. So we see know if the guy went through a walkthrough or not.
Right. Well, what are they going to do Wednesday? I mean, they're going to probably put out a if we had practice today type practice injury.
No, but that would be like a Friday practice for a Sunday game. Remember, it's 2 days before.
Yeah, you're right. But they're not going to practice that day, so
they will. Absolutely will. 2 days.
Isn't that a travel day? Wednesday? Oh, yeah. They'll practice and then get on a plane.
Travel day's Thursday, dude. It's the day before the game.
I'm not sure. I thought that
unless they want to get there early.
Yeah,
unless they want to get used to the time change.
Check into that. I thought I heard that they might go out the day before.
Okay, but here's the first question: is what's the time change? Do we know?
It is Central.
I have
Central.
No idea.
Yeah.
Oh, it's only an hour, so that doesn't matter. Okay.
It's just because it's a long flight south, but I think
that's right.
Yeah.
Their bodies. Do they want to get used to? I remember Joe Banner telling us years ago when and people remember this was brutal. When the Eagles played a Sunday night at home, it was the game when Vince Young played against Seattle, started, I think, on a short week.
Yeah.
So, folks, you could correct me. Did they not play the Cardinals that Sunday night and they crushed? Or I don't know what it was. Maybe it was, I don't know who they played that Sunday. But it had to fly on a short week, on a 3-hour time change, flying east to west. And they got absolutely handled on Thursday. I believe it was Seattle. And Joe said, he had a talk with the league. We won't go into exactly what he said, but I just remember saying he made sure it never happened again.
Yeah. By the way, geographically, I am yes, south, but Sao Paulo is actually east of Philadelphia. Because remember, South America, that right side of it, the nose of it, it really juts out. So it's probably in the same time zone. It's just a very far flight south, almost southeasterly. So yeah, if you look at it, I'm looking at a map right now. I'm like, yeah, South Palo is definitely more. I mean, because South America, that part of it is almost east of where the easternmost part of Canada. So it'll be interesting. I think it's the same time zone, but it's a very long flight. And I'd have to check. Isn't that an elevation thing too? Where
Could be.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll check in. So for our next podcast, we'll know when the departure date is and what.
And one more for you. I hope that the field is good, because if you watch the England games,
Yeah.
soccer stadium, guys are slipping. I've yet to see a great turf at these games in England, where nobody complains. It's very rare for anyone not to complain about it.
Right.
So we'll see about that. But and again, to finish it off, as we said at the top here, I cannot wait to see what the crowd's like. Is it going to be Eagle Green? Is it going to be? It can be a lot of yellow and whatever the green, the Packer colors is going. As you were saying, is it going to be 60-40 Eagles? Is it going to be even? We know the Packer fans travel, but nobody travels better than the Eagle fans.
That's right.
But we'll see what happens.
All right. I did forget to mention when I was talking about Mike Quick and our Patreon channel. If anybody wants to join, they should join to get into that. It's patreon.com/InsideTheBirds. That's where you can sign up and become a member. That's going to do it for this edition of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.